important things regarding UI UX. Please be reminded that our morning session will run from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. with each speaker being allotted an hour to talk about his or her topic and address your questions later on. The Q&A portion will be facilitated by our teammate Richelle immediately after each speaker has concluded their respective talk. Please make sure your mic is turned off unless you're requested to talk to avoid disruptions and turn on your cameras during the virtual group photos. You are encouraged to be interactive, especially when the speaker asks for your input. First part of our fire session is a talk by Chris Torregosa, who is a UX, UI, and visual designer for 6 years with a master's in design from Shute University in Taiwan. He worked as a UI design consultant before transitioning to UX design at Lesmark and now UI UX in Postnord. In a nutshell, he collaborates with cross-country teams in designing user experience and digital products that align with business needs. His experience transcends from building strong brand strategy and his expertise in typography and visual storytelling to designing meaningful experiences with user research, UX design, interaction design, and usability testing. On every design projects, he injects design thinking and design research using data and user insights in informing design decisions. With that, I'll be giving the virtual floor now to our first speaker for today's virtual fire session, Chris Torregosa, to talk about the basics of UI UX for startups.
Hi, good morning. Sure.
Good morning.
Hi, yeah, I'm still figuring out how to navigate through Zoom. I don't normally use this. Oh, hi. So there. Let me try sharing my screen if I won't destroy everything. Oh, wait. Some technical issue. Let me just. Oops. Let me try this. Sorry for the. There. Oh, I have to quit and reopen Zoom. Wait, let me just do it real quick. Let me just quick zoom a little. Now I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
And we can see you.
Right.
Yes, we can.
Let me try sharing my screen. You guys seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. So let me try moving this a little bit. So I'm Chris Torregosa from Postnord, and I am tasked to share my learnings on introduction to UI UX design. And I know, wait, since it's still quite early, I'm just gonna start this real slow. I'm gonna start with a story with Jawbone. It is a startup story, which, so Jawbone designed a wristband app. And in this, that was actually 2011. So when they did this, there were still no one in the market. So they were one of the first movers. So the goal of the app is really to count the steps, count your calories, your sleeping patterns, and with the app itself, they wanted to notify users to, let's say, if you're sitting for like 30 minutes, it suggests to take a walk, take a stand, and just to have that healthy lifestyle. So that's the goal of Jawbone, to gamify health and to improve wellness of the people. So when they launched 2011, they really hit the ground running. They were really strong. And as you can see here, everything was well designed, well planned, and everything was well polished, that by 2013, they have secured a huge funding of $3 billion. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, that's in US terms. Even around 2011, that's a lot. And as you can see, really, their product is, or as you can see, it's shiny, it's sleek, sexy. By 2011, 2013 standard, their product packaging is well planned. You can't see, you can seem to really expect them as a startup. Their bands are well designed. Everything is really well planned, and you can see the app itself is very shiny by 2013 standard, and everything by the surface, it seems that they already post themselves as a successful startup. But sadly, just 2016, Jawbone, once valued at $3 billion, is going out of business. So this is an article from inc.com. So what went wrong? I mean, how come that the company with very good funding, with good design, with good products, managed to really just throw 3 billion on the garbage can? So one of the issues that they have suspected is because of this. So instead of your wristband connecting directly to your phone wirelessly, you have to remove it from your arm, take off the cap, and plug the audio jack on your phone. So that's the only time that the what I call this, that the app will be able to capture all of the data that was recorded on your wrist. And if you will think like the founder, um, you might possibly think that this is just a small road bump. People will still love the product. They will still buy this product. But he was dumbfounded. When they released 2013, their first product, they got complaints after complaints that they have to refund everything that the consumer bought. So that's a huge issue. I mean, if you are the user, if you try to be the user, if this cap here will, let's say, be lost, or you place it somewhere, you will have this awkward audio jack on your wrist, right? Um, in the founder's perspective, that would be okay, but for the user's perspective, that would be nothing. That's worth nothing already. The goal of the wrist is to look what do you call this one, to look high tech, or to look better than the other person. So the founder's vision and also the user's perspective is really quite, there's a misalignment right there. And here is an article from Fast Company that the app for the Jawbone app got me thinking about that dilemma, simply because for a very basic app, there's too many paths to ultimately doing the same thing. You can go around in circles on the thing that quickly lends to exhausting feeling of being lost. And when you see two different ways to do the same thing, such as taking a photo or meal or track a workout, it leaves you this nagging worry that no UI should ever create. Am I doing this the right way? So this clearly explains that there is a problem. Even though their product looks good, looks sexy, there's still some parts of it that's the experience is not quite there. They haven't nailed the experience, even though they made it look shiny and sexy. So the question is, what's UI UX design? The so before excuse me, before we dig deep on the topic, let me just introduce myself. I am Chris, a Philippine-based UX designer for 6 years, and I currently work at PostNord. So PostNord is like LBC for B2B, B2C sector, and what we do is we manage, on my end as a UX designer at PostNord, we maintain the portal where big companies, let's say H&M is like one of our biggest clients. in PostNord. And what we do is we maintain this portal where we let the employees at H&M track the parcels from the user ordering in their page, and from us delivering the parcel to the user. So we maintain the portal so that they can track their parcels, manage their invoices, what else? Create reports or stuff like that. And PostNord is operating in 4 Scandinavian countries. That's Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. So my work involves user research, applying design thinking methodologies, workshop, and designing prototype, and usability testing. So in retrospect, I actually started my career on a completely different track. I started as a seafarer. So 2010, I started my career as a seafarer at Virgin Shipping Company. And I was actually a seafarer, a seaman, for roughly about half a decade, almost half a decade. And on my last vessel assignment, I was already doubting myself. I mean, I think I'm not really cut out for the job. I don't like being away on land for 13 months. And while I was on the ship, I was already training myself to become a designer, because when I was in college, University of Cebu, I have this um, sort of hobby of mine to design T-shirts for the campus, for, let's say, intramurals. I designed T-shirts for that, and I was doing it for fun, and it really took a lot of my time. Like, I mean, I would design one T-shirt for the whole night until around dawn, and I'm still okay. I mean, I'm happy doing it, and I thought, I think this is something I want to pursue, not just as a hobby, but as a job. So when I got off board, it was 2014, around the end part of 2014. I was already looking for a job as a graphic designer, and gladly, after probably about a month, I got a graphic design job. Then transitioned myself to design consultancy online, and yeah, that's how I started in the design industry. And by mid of 2016, a startup, Motivosity, hired me as a UI designer. Well, actually, it's a different design task. It wasn't just UI design. I was doing graphic design for marketing team, and I was doing what do you call this one? Print design for different departments in the company. But it was still a startup. So in 2018, a company, Lexmark, a printer company, um, they contacted me through LinkedIn, thinking if I wanted the UX design role that they are offering. And I figured UX design at that time was really, it wasn't that much. There were like few articles online, but this UX design as a job is really, you can see it in Cebu at that time, 2018. So I figured, I think I wanted to be part of the team, not just be the sole designer. So I joined the team, Lexmark, and I was also taking up masters at that time at Shuri University, Taiwan. And then also, my master's is quite peculiar. It's a collaboration between Shuri and also UP University, UP Cebu. So they use the campus UP Cebu, but the professors and the what do you call this one? The lessons were actually patterned from Shuri. So some of our professors stays here for like 2 weeks to teach, and then another professor will come. So it's quite a different program, so to speak. And after Lexmark, I decided to go design consultancy because I was finishing up my thesis at that time. So I figured I really have to focus this, because this is really hard. If I will fail this, I have to go to Taiwan to study. So I have to keep my priorities. And then to 2020, early 2020, I joined PostNord as a UX designer. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So let's go back to the topic. What really is UI UX design? So before we go to the design part, let's go to the UI UX part. I'm just going to get this off on first. I'm just gonna get this off first. UI is not UX and UX is not UI. I'm going to dig deep on that, but I'm just going to say that there's no similarities between both. Yeah. So first, I'm going to discuss about UI. So UI is user interface. A user interface is a tool, a point of interaction, and a means of communication between the person and the machine. Now it's actually person and the system, not the machine, because before we already have a lot of interfaces. The hardware interface, like this, the telephone is an interface between you and dialing up the person you wanted to call to. A mouse is an interaction between you and the computer, so you can control the computer, you can perform functions. So that's the user interface. And the UX, user experience, is the interaction itself. So it includes the interfaces, it includes different parts of the experience itself. So somehow UI is actually a subset of UX. It's inside the experience. You can see here at the bottom part, this is the journey mapping where we map out the experience. Let's say Lizzie here, shopping for a dress. So we map out the parts where she was happy and the parts where she is feeling the pain point she's feeling. And with that, while navigating through, let's say Lazada here, she's shopping a dress at Lazada, we map out every area that's causing her pain points, and then finding ways to improve that experience. So user experience is like a huge topic, but let's try to narrow it down in as much as I can. So to put it simply in a serial analogy here, this is your product contents. So as you can see here, the cereal, the raisins, and all of that is your content. And here on the left side here is your product. The spoon is the user interface. This is the interface of you, the person, and the content. And user experience is the experience of consuming the content. So to put it simply, it's somehow similar as this analogy. And let's say, for example, Facebook. So Facebook is this. The contents are the posts that your friends posted on Facebook. And the user interface is, of course, the Facebook interface. And the user experience there is the act of consuming the contents of your friends. So if you remove the contents here, if you remove the posts on your timeline from the groups you followed or from your ex or from your girlfriends, your boyfriends rather, and what you will have is this empty shell that is Facebook. So that in itself explains a lot on what user experience and user interfaces. So let's put it as an example. Let's apply this to a website. So the element of an interface starts with a button. The whole interface comprises of different elements there and components that comprises everything that is an interface. So you can see here, an element makes up the whole UI. So you can see a button right here, the search bar, the categories right here. So everything here are elements that makes up the UI, the user interface. And the UX part answers the why. Why is the search bar so huge? Why is the search button orange? Why is this shown free $10 voucher? Why inform users that there's effortless shipping? Why are the groupings done this way? And why are we grouping them according to consumer electronics, audio devices, gaming? So UX is like the underlying structure on the user interface itself. So where to find answers to why? Anyone can answer? Where to find answers to why? None? Okay. I'll answer it myself. You can find answers to the people themselves. Because according to IDEO, good design involves deep understanding of the problems and realities of the people you're designing for. Um, I can't really stress this enough because the very basic, the core, what do you call this one? Key skill set of a designer, of a UX designer, is really a deep understanding of the problems and realities of the people. It involves a lot of empathy and trying to feel how they feel, how what troubles them, what's their realities, what are they experiencing at that very moment while interacting with your product. So this is basically the encapsulated quote of what of UX design rather. So let's jump into the UX design process. Let's try to walk on the shoe of a UX designer. So this is how the process looks like for a UX designer. It starts with discover. The discovery part is where we get insights from stakeholders, gather requirements, and then we jump into research where designers try to capture the user's needs through different methodologies and different workshops. And from there, we design the wireframe and those information architecture according to the previously conducted research and discover phase. And from that design, we validate it with, again, another set of research methodologies. And it loops back again to discover until we finally have a working product. But it's a constant iteration and constant repetition of processes. So let's start with discover. This is where we find out the limitations and the base requirement of the product. And the goal here is really to nail down what is needed and, excuse me, and what is the technical limitations. Let's say, what can we use here? Can we use AI? Can we use machine learning? Can we use, what technologies is possible right now? So we try to capture that because we try to see what's possible and what can be applied based on what we can gather next, which is the research part. So in the research part, we find out what the user's needs and their realities. So empathy is key here. We try to capture the very core need of the user with user interviews, user persona creation, and journey mapping. And as you can see here on the right, is actually a user persona. It's a somehow a fun. I made it a little more fun, but it's a real user journey where we trace which part are causing pain points to the user and which part we can leverage on and improve. So yeah, this is where we try to map everything in the research phase. So the next one is design. Based off on the gathered data, draft how the interface will look so we can gather quick feedback. So the goal here is quick feedback. So the previous step was research. Here we try to design the interface based on that research. So what do they need first? What does the user needed here? If they are blind, how can we help them with audio? If they are disabled, how can we assist them? So those scenarios are covered in design. And the last part is validate. This is where we test if our prototype, the one we designed earlier, really makes sense. I mean, we are, as UX designer, even experts, are just assuming if the product design really makes sense to the user or does it solve their issue. So this is the part where this is like the as they call it, this is the battlefield. This is where all of the assumptions are tested and all of those stakeholders will be notified if their solution really is the right solution for the user. So that's the last part of UX design. Let's try to jump in to UI design process. This is the UX design loop, and the UI UX design process looks like this. So from discovery research, when we go to the design, then if it's two different person, if the UI designer is different from the UX designer, we send it to the UI designer here, where they design to make it look good. They try to pattern from the wireframe that was sent, apply design elements, apply color, apply typography, animation, so stuff like that. All of those will be handled in the UI design process. But if it is one person, so we just go with the flow and just try to design everything. And again, loop back here and then go to validate, discover, and research again. So for the style guide part in UI design, this is basically the foundation of UI design. This is where this actually happens only once. You design the style guide once and then you can just reapply it again. But the core here is to be able to set the standard colors, the branding colors, and also the typography, because this will be the very foundation of your design system. Okay, so design system is actually like a whole system of design. So it composes your drop down, your search bar. How does it look? Does it look the same with your drop down? So all of those components actually rely on the style guide. Next is the UI components. So from the style guide, a set of will set as foundation of the elements in your UI components. As you can see here, this is actually the Microsoft UI components. This is their style guide. And you can see it's very familiar, right? So the task here is to design different components that will be applicable in your what do you call this, in your interface. So as you can see, we have typography here. We have colors. So everything here is very much dependent on the style guide. And from the UI components, we designed the prototype. So this is where we make use of all of the components designed and apply it on the interface itself, based off on the designed wireframe from the UX process earlier. So this is the whole UI UX progression. You can see the first part here is the whole workshops, interviews, gathering of data, and then from wireframe, and then a more beautiful wireframe, but still it's a wireframe. And the last part is where we make it more appealing, because there is actually a bias, a aesthetic usability bias, they call it. It is because the users, so the bias is aesthetically pleasing products tend to be perceived as more easy to use or more usable, so to speak. So we try to leverage on that bias and apply it on the design itself. So we try to make it more pleasing on this part. You can see that the very first part is UX design and the last part is UI design. And why are we putting much effort on UX design? I mean, we can just design directly on the UI, make it look beautiful, and then give it to the user. Why are we putting much effort and investment on all of these, where in fact we still end up with this one, with this nice looking product? It is because one reason is because of this, the progression of economic value. So the progression of economic value, this may be a little bit jarring. It's like high school or college, but bear with me here. Joseph Pine and James Gilmore actually somehow theorized this from their book, The Experience Economy. And what this shows is as time goes by, the competitive positioning and the pricing of the products are actually getting more premium, and the competitive positioning actually became more differentiated. So as you can see, we started the agricultural agrarian era with just mere commodities. I mean, if you go to the market at the time, there's no Copico, there's no Nescafe. All we have is just coffee. So they compete heavily on lowering their price down. But as the time goes by, we already have premium products that we wanted, even if there's commodity, there's a more mass-produced products. That is because as we evolve, we try to find something that will help us, that will assist us in our day-to-day life. Let me just give an example of this. So let's just have coffee as an example. So coffee during the agrarian era, agrarian age, is what I've mentioned earlier, starts with just this, a commodity. It's undifferentiated, and the pricing is pretty much the lowest. They compete on lowering the price down. But during the Industrial Revolution, we have brands, we have coffee that's different from the other. We already have Nescafe, we have Copico, we have Blend. So they try to compete on branding, so to speak. But we didn't quite stop there. We went from industrialized to service economy rather. So instead of looking for brands, we are looking for products that serves us. We are trying to make our task easier. We want to be served, but still we didn't stop there. From from service economy, we now have this, the experience economy. This is where Starbucks really championed the Starbucks experience, so to speak, because they managed to put a premium price on a coffee that's basically can be bought at commodity price. But because of their experience, they somehow can ask a higher price, and they manage to differentiate themselves to the rest of the coffee. So let's try to make use of the Starbucks experience on this. Have you tried walking through the in front of a Starbucks shop, Starbucks coffee shop? You might notice this, that you can smell coffee, right? Even though there's probably no one making coffee inside. That is because there's actually a scent, a coffee scent that's being placed somewhere just for you to smell coffee. It is actually a research. So every UX experience, UX methodologies involves a lot of research and try to understand what will make this user buy our product and what will make them feel good about our product. So with Starbucks, they really curated everything. If you try to look at their coffee shop, you will always see almost the same patterns. You will see this slightly orange light with like a dark room, and a what else, with a rustic, there's always wood in there. So there's always a pattern because they've already done a pretty good research on making you feel good about the product. Let's jump in to a more Philippine version of this UX design. I joined a UX conference few weeks back, I think 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago. And one of the speakers was Liza Gokongwei. She's the daughter of the late John Gokongwei. So they owned pretty much one of the oldest, one of the largest conglomerate in the Philippines. So they manage Cebu Pacific, Universal Robina, Robinson's Land, Robinson's Malls, you name it, they are on every other sectors. They, and of course, as a company that's existed for 6 decades, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, really the tradition is really well on their roots. They are grounded. They're pretty much, they don't want, they resisted change. But in 2018, I think you've heard of Summit Media. It's also one of their flagship companies. What happened was 2018, they were forced to stop printing magazines. They were once one of the biggest publishers in the Philippines. They printed Cosmopolitan, Cosmopolitan rather, FHM, Top Gear, what else? I can't recall already. There's a lot of magazines that they printed, but because of disruption and innovation from different sectors, they were put on the side, and they were forced to just fold their publishing side of the business. So this really pushed them to make innovations in the company. What Liza did is she talked to his brother Lance Gokongwei. He's currently the owner. I don't know owner, but the president of JG Summit, and she told her brother that if it happened to Summit Media, it can happen to the rest of their businesses. So it really struck them. I mean, for many years, 60 years, they're in the industry, but there's chance that they will be overcome or overswept by another starting or a startup rather. So what she did is she brought in different visionaries and different leaders in the industry and talked to the company, conduct speaking engagement, so they will be notified about this new processes, the UX design process, and also design thinking and agile methodologies, just so they keep their level of innovation at par with the rest of the world. And one of the key takeaways for that was the server's blueprinting session they did for supplier experience. This was for Universal Rubina. So Universal Rubina is manufacturing C2, Jack and Jill. I don't know already. There's a lot, but what they did here is they mapped out the whole supplier experience, that a process that a Universal Rubina's process, which usually take 2 months, now only take a day. So that's a huge improvement just by applying UX design methodologies. I mean, this is not interface itself, but this is about finding out the problem, the underlying problem, and being able to put in solutions that will make sense and to solve problems, not just make it look good or make it look shiny. The goal is to really go deep on the problem, find out what's causing it, and provide a more viable solution that will help the user, in this case, the supplier. So yeah, that's how they managed to champion the tradition at JG Summit, managed to put in UX design, inject UX design process in their traditional, their decade-old processes. So to recap, the focus of UX design is understand the needs and realities of the user, aligning that with business needs and technical limitations, usability of the product, and of course, the validation part. While the focus of UI design is aesthetics, legibility of text, layout of contents, contrast, and of course, the branding elements. So for further reading, I couldn't recommend this highly enough. These 3 books really changed my perspective on UX. And of course, these 2 books, if you are quite low on budget, you can just start with these 2 books, Design of Everyday Things and Don't Make Me Think. They serve as one of the cannot say it, but they somehow became like the foundation of UX. And if you are starting in UX, you have to read these 2 books. It makes you a whole lot well versed in also capturing design flaws and design issues. With creative confidence, it somehow shows some applications of UX design methods, and they apply it on real world problems. So this is also a good book to be able to dig deep and find examples on applications of UX. So for online resources, I'm going to start with NN Group. This is really one of the biggest um, companies in, and also one of the leaders in usability and UX design. And you can probably see here in my previous page, Don Norman here, the author of Design of Everyday Things. He's actually one of the owner here. He's one of the N in NN Group. That's Nielsen and Norman Group. And he is like one of the UX god. He's respected in the industry. So you can see here, Nielsen Norman Group. This is their website. Even me, as a UX practitioner, I'm still going back on this website. I'm still reading all of their articles about usability, about UX processes, because there's always something new to learn. I mean, what was UX design before? I mean, users before, let's say 5 years ago, they are less distracted. They pretty much have higher attention span compared to now. So there's always a new UX trend that's going to be presented. Next will be Usability Geek. I also go through some parts of this, but yeah, they also make one of the best articles on UX best practices and updates on UX design. Also usability.gov. This is where I gather what do you call this one, templates and processes. You can really get a lot from here, because this is patterned, authored by different groups of UX leaders, and they somehow gathered everything and combine it in one. So you can download templates, documents, how to conduct user research, how to do usability testing, and all of that. And of course, the last but not the least in UX is interactiondesign.org. I still read here. There's also a lot of courses with regards to UX and also UI design. And yeah, you can just check the site. They offer a lot of insights there. For UI design, Spotify Design is a good source if you're starting, let's say, your design system. It shows how they really crafted their design, and you can really see how Spotify diversified their whole assets. They are available on your phone, on your desktop, on your smartwatch, on whatever smart devices you have. They are there, and that in itself speaks volumes on how they really manage to keep their design, their UI, their interfaces actually almost quite the same. They manage to keep the consistencies, but that is really, that's a work of 20, 50 designers trying to collaborate with each other. So this is a good resource on that, on starting the design system. And of course, Mosley is where I get some inspirations for new UI trends, let's say for animations and for how to show data, how to present data. So similar as this one. So it's a good resource also. And awards.com is where I get some web design inspirations. So they really focus on web design. Well, there's a little bit of mobile, but they really focus on web design. So yeah. Also Dribble. I also checked this website for they call it shots. It's like one screen design. Let's say like the login page, if you want to improve your login page, and if you want to, let's say, improve your let's say checkout forms for your e-commerce, you can see a lot here. It's like one page design for designers who's like just throwing things on Dribble. So it's a good resource. So yeah, let's wrap this session with a quote from Frank Chimero. He said that people ignore design that ignores people. And that speaks a lot on how we should design and how we should design our products, that we shouldn't ignore people. Let's start with people, because they are the very ones who will be using the product. So yeah, people ignore design that ignores people. So it's a wrap. Thank you so much. And I would love to hear your questions if we still have time. I think we're still on time. So that's me, Chris Torrigosa. You can catch me at christorigasa.com or in LinkedIn.
So thank you so much, Sir Krish. That was very informative and a well thought presentation. Okay, we still have time, Sir Chris. We
Yep.
still have 15 minutes
Yep.
before the next session. Okay, so the virtual floor is now open for questions.
Yes, please. We have none.
Okay.
I have one. I have one. Right.
Yes.
Chris, can you share to us what are the usual common mistakes that uh, beginners at UI UX make, so our startups can learn from that and avoid those?
Okay, interesting. Common mistakes is really assuming that you know the user, assuming that you are the user. That's even us in our industry at PostNord. There's still a lot of stakeholders, POs, and one of the big what do you call this one? Sub management. They still assume that no, the user knows this. The user loves this. We shouldn't assume that we are the user. That's the one of the biggest mistake, because it can lead to like inside out perspective, like assuming that they know everything, where in fact we know everything. They know nothing about us. So yeah, that's the common mistake that most companies and even most designers make.
I have
Yes.
a question.
Sure.
Thank you for your excellent answer, insights and
Sure.
presentation. With regards to users, we have experienced in our app. Our app is a grocery app. No, it's
Yes.
b.i.t.e.s, and there are once in a while, or very very occasionally, we receive feedbacks from customers, especially those na medyo may edad na, and we get feedback, for instance, that they have a hard time pinning their um, location on our parang locator or
Yeah.
GPS thing in their app. So, but in cases we're in, and we do try to address these issues, and we try to improve it, and speak it out with our programmers, and but sometimes out of the many users there's only one that brings it up, and it's how do we know if it's an isolated case, or it's something that we should take with as much urgency as um, all other priorities we have, since being a startup, our resources are limited,
Yeah.
and our time, and we have a lot of things that we are striving to improve, and then these things come along,
Hmm.
and how do we gauge if that is something that affects everyone else, and
Hmm.
uh,
Makes sense.
when it's only one person complaining, and we don't want to underestimate or undervalue the feedback of
Yeah.
one customer just because it's only one. So how does that, no,
Yeah.
how do we,
Um, in that case, when budget is an issue, you try to like gauge in if um if ignoring or disregarding this issue will help us more rather than addressing the issue, because in this case, you're trying to manage your budget while also trying to solve an issue together with the rest of other issues that you have in your hand. What you can do is really just do low budget. We have this survey. We also do this in PostNord even. We try to gather feedback, because in your case, if there's one feedback, there's probably more that are just hiding behind. They don't want to speak it out, because as Filipino, as we are pretty much polite. We don't want to be the bearer of bad news, so to speak. So we always try to please the other person. So with that, that's actually quite bad. Even Europeans and my clients in the US doesn't like that. They want to speak up. They want to learn on the very onset what's the problem. But as Filipinos, we try to hide it. So in that regard, try to do survey forms in your, you have your app, right?
Yeah, yes, we
Yeah,
do.
you can try. Have you tried Hotjar? Hotjar is like,
Yeah.
okay, so Hotjar is a good resource. It's a good tool to gather quick feedback and to
Mhm.
address scenarios wherein people doesn't want to contact customer service. They don't want to report this bug. So if you place, so what it does is when the user is using the product, let's say you can put a delay, 10 minutes delay. So if they are stuck, most likely they will be there for 10 minutes or more or 5 minutes. So they can, there's a question there. You can customize it, asking what went wrong, what happened, do you need help? So with that, they can pretty much address directly, and you can gather quick feedback from that and iterate on that if it's really prevalent in your app.
Yes, sir. That's very practical and helpful insight. Actually, that's one of my concerns because we know that there are people that delete, and it's we're lucky to get feedback, even just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite valuable to me as we try to improve constantly.
Mm.
And I think it would help talaga if we have that tool to get, because it's hard for us to get a word from our customers.
Exactly.
Some of them just say, it's okay lang. So,
Exactly. Oh,
and we want something in our case, being a startup, if possible, my devil's advocate yun,
exactly.
so that
Exactly.
we
Oh.
can constantly improve. So it's really hard to get feedbacks in the first place. Mm.
Yeah. So the goal as a founder is really to make that easy for the user,
Okay.
to make easy how they make feedback on how they can contribute and improving your products. So yeah,
Thank you very much, sir.
sure. Any other?
Thank you, Kit. Okay. Sir Chris, we have a question here in our chat box. It's sent to me directly. What are the trends now for UX and UI? What do users usually look into when using products, especially in this digital era, adhering to the challenges of the pandemic?
That's a little bit that's a very generic question. But the answering that doesn't really isn't black and white. There's no concrete answer. And of course, let's address first the first question, trends. UX design doesn't have much trends. We try to address on what's the current, what do you call this one, worldview of the people, because we really focus on the user. And one of the major trends really was, um, through my career, is really just the attention span. That's it. We try to address that by adding um, more, what do you call this one, labels and more information where they are, because they tend to get distracted. Um, so that's UX part. But for UI, it's really quite versatile. The grounds are always shifting. Have you, as you have noticed, for the past 3 years only, we have gone from skeuomorphic to flat to gradient, and then back to gradient again, and I know, back to skeuomorphic again, slowly going back there. So I can't say what's the new UI trends, but you can actually focus on addressing the problem, finding the right solution for that, and you are more better equipped on focusing the user problems compared to depending on trends. So to answer on your second question, can you repeat the second question?
Sure, Sir Chris. Okay, for a while. Okay, what do users usually look into now when using products, especially in this digital era, adhering to the challenges of the pandemic?
Addressing to the pandemic. Okay,
Challenges of the pandemic.
challenges of the pandemic. Okay, that's a little bit hard. What they are looking for in a product. Um, okay, here's the cue. If you are designing a product, make sure to always start with what the user is searching, because before they are I know what what your user is looking for in your product, so to speak. So, um, let's say for example, Lazada. Before the user will tap on the Lazada app, there's already like a lot of things in their mind. They want to find their dress. They want to find their I don't know, a gift for their grandma. So we don't start with what they are looking. You start with why they are looking for this. What's the purpose of this? So it's good to start with why rather than what. Why is, of course, it's more challenging to find, but once you find it, it's a lot more it's a lot more gratifying to find out why, because you can have different solutions, you can offer different products with that. So yeah, I can't really pinpoint a clear direct answer on what they're looking for um, at par with the challenges in the pandemic. But of course, as a somehow a worldview right now is we try to be distracted. So that's one of the things probably we can start with, because of our realities right now. We try to get out of our minds, we get out of our current self and try to be this way. That's why probably now there's a lot of people purchasing. Even in Postner, we have records high of shipments because of that. Because there's a lot of people ordering already, probably because of the pandemic. That's one of the reasons we are looking at. But yeah, I hope I answered your question. Whose question was that, by the way? Um, I'm quite general at that. I can't really pinpoint the right answer. But yeah.
It's coming from one of our participants. Maybe he or she is too shy, sir.
Okay, no problem. It's okay.
Okay. Any more questions from our participants? Okay, let's see if someone is unmuting. Going once.
None?
None. Okay. Okay, Sir Jason, ko na lang. You've mentioned about attention span. Okay, I do agree because human by nature has a short attention span. Sir Chris, do we have an ideal, say, clicks or time frame for UX to address this issue?
Time frame. Can you give more context on that, Richard?
Like for example, sa UX, how many clicks or how many time should the customer be dealing with your UX?
Interesting.
Mm-mm.
Okay. We have this. Actually, it was around, I think, 2018. They have this benchmark to have 3 clicks before they can get what they want, but somehow that changed. There was a research done. There's actually a research in, I think, NN Group. They posted that it's not about number of clicks. It's about getting what they want, because there are times when it's really not about clicks. It's about the process, the whole process. Okay, let me just give this an example. There was a research done in one of the airport terminal. I'm not sure where that is. I think in Dubai, where they get frequent complaints that the baggage arrived very late. So what happened was, instead of making the baggage arrive faster, they make the trip from the airplane to the baggage counter a lot longer. So what happened was, instead of going straight from the airplane, going directly to the baggage counter, they loop around the people just to make it, just so when they arrive at the baggage counter, their baggage is already there. And the complaints are disappeared, basically. It reduces or disappeared. So it's a good research, because time is pretty much arbitrary. It's relative, it's abstract, and what we as researchers do is find out why they're complaining this, and being able to address a solution based on that is really will solve a lot of issues. So yeah, that's a good example on really not relying on time and number of clicks.
Okay, noted, Sir Chris. Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. Any last reminders for our incubatees and startups?
Okay. So Final word from me is, I think I have mentioned it quite frequently already. Always start with the user. Start with what they need, what they want. Of course, you have to know it from them directly, but never start a product with technology. It's a huge mistake. Start with the user. Start with what they need, and then build your product around the user, not on your capabilities or your technologies. It will never work. Sometimes it does, but most of the time it doesn't. So yeah, start with the user and build your product around them. So yeah,
Okay, thank you so much again,
sure,
Sir Chris.
no
Okay,
problem.
I'll now give back the virtual floor to Ma'am Shore.
All right. Thank you, Chill. Thank you, Chris, for that. So,
Sure.
before we conclude your part of the session, we'd like to have a virtual group photo with you first. So, can I request everyone to turn on their cameras?
Okay.
All right. Waiting for the rest. Okay. 3, 2. All right. Okay. May habol pa? 3, 2, 1. Smile. Okay, done. Thank you so much, Chris, for that talk. All right. Thank you. And now we're
Thank
gonna
you.
head on to our next speaker for this morning. The next part of our virtual session is a talk by China Sevillano, who is an experienced engineer at MELD CX, designing systems focused on vision analytics. Before joining MELD CX, please correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, right? It's MELD CX, right? All right, all right. Before joining Meld CX, she was a front-end mobile developer for Netson Tech, where she first explored her love for design and development. She is also the co-founder of UX Society Davao and a core member of UX DVO, where she enjoys co-organizing local design events and meetups. Outside of work, she loves to play ping pong and traveling. So without further ado, I'll be handing the mic now to our second guest speaker, China Sevillano, who will tackle the application of customers' feedback on UI UX.
Hi. Teka, I'll just set up. How do you do Zoom? Same with Chris actually. I don't use Zoom. Teka. Clearly.
You can share the screen. There's tab there.
Share screen. Yan. Perfect. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So hi guys. Thank you so much for inviting me, by the way, to the guys at CDO b.i.t.e.s. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about getting feedback and improving your UX. So actually a while ago, somebody asked about getting feedback from customers. And basically, I think it's the same, we all have the same goal in this session. We want to receive feedback that is valuable and actionable on our end, especially now that we are in startups, diba? So I might speak in both English and Tagalog, sometimes Bisaya, kasi ano, diba? You guys are from CDO, if I'm not mistaken. Tama ba? And in order to feel, more closer to the audience, I want gusto ko na it will be a bit more personal. So, actually, kanina, as someone asked about feedback, I think it was Ihat did. They touched a little bit on feedback and giving feedback, receiving feedback. How do we get feedback from our customers? How do we prioritize feedback? And how do we know if it's crucial for a startup and which one should be applied? So we will touch on that later. For now, I want to start by introducing myself. So I'm China. I am an experienced engineer at b.i.t.e.s. So it's been about 3 years since I first started venturing into UX design. But this is actually my first formal UX design job at b.i.t.e.s. So I started in just this year. So I co-founded UX Society Davao in 2017. This is basically a sub-organization of UX Society in Manila. So it's a student-led organization wherein we advocate for user-centric design and advocacies, because during that time at our school, we didn't really have like lessons on human-computer interaction, nothing. Nobody knew what UX was about. But fortunately, I was scrolling through my Facebook feed and saw this post by a friend whom I just added as a friend because he was interesting. So I saw this post. I think it was about what is UX design, stuff like that, psychology, and I'm very deeply interested in user psychology. So I clicked on that and started reading on UX and reading, and then I got hooked. And I started doing online classes on UX. And from then, I said that I wanted to make this a career because I wanted to be more involved rather than being a developer. I wanted to be more involved in the process of creating products. I wanted to be close to the customer. So that was one of my motivations in making UX as a career in college. So when I graduated in college, I joined UX Davao as a core member in 2019. So that was last year. Basically, UX Davao is like Cebu XD or UXPH in Manila. So these are parang professional UX groups already. So these are practitioners of UX and stuff like that that they organize mga events, meetups, and stuff like that. So that's what we do. And basically, we do a lot of trainings and workshops. Pero because of the pandemic, of course, we do it online na lang. So I actually started as a mobile developer in my first job. So why didn't I venture into UX? At that time, UX openings were very scarce. Like if you search through LinkedIn, it's rare to see someone looking for a junior UX designer. So fortunately, I had a friend who connected me to b.i.t.e.s. So actually b.i.t.e.s is based in Australia, but our headquarters is actually located in Cagayan. I think I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but yeah, we have headquarters in Cagayan. Our name there is Skunkworks. So I'm part of that a group. So we design vision analytics systems wherein we teach cameras or sensors to see like human beings. So based on that, we derive analytics. So when I'm designing that kind of system, actually when I first started working, it was, you're first junior UX designer and then you're one of the few pioneer UX design people there. So we are working similarly like a startup. There was a lot of self-learning. There was a lot of feedback sessions. And you as a first UX designer, you have to be proactive with your growth. So if you can't just react to, like, for example, someone tasks you to do this and do that. That's not what we should be doing as UX designers. We have to foresee, we need to have insight before our customers even say something about our product. So we have to, what they call that? Be their advocate. So that's one thing I've learned from working as a UX designer. So in the industry, like actual working, it's been like a few, about less than a year. But for our topic, we actually have, I actually have a bit of experience. So I'm going to share it with you later on. So, Becca. I actually did this slide in Figma. A little bit more about me. So of course, I like to play ping pong as our introduction speaker talked about kanina. And then I also do a bit of photography. I like to travel and I like to bike. So since the pandemic, I could only do a few of my hobbies now kasi of course lockdowns are everywhere, and I'm pretty sure you've heard naman na Davao is one of the COVID hotspots in Philippines. So it's really hard to do the things that I used to enjoy now. So I would like to touch on now on UX. So kanina, Sir Chris actually touched a lot on UX, like really good insight on UX. So I want to build up on that, more on why is UX important and what is involved in UX. So let me tell you a story about this company. I think everyone's familiar with it naman, diba? Jollibee, whenever we pass by, parang it reminds us of childhood, you know. There's a certain nostalgia into it, and there's certain, whenever we pass by, our senses are basically heightened because one, we can smell the chicken cooking from the kitchens, and then we can also see people with their French fries and stuff like that. There's actually this meme saying na it's better to smell someone else's parang scent on the jeep rather than smell their yum burger. Kasi the UX, user experience and customer experience, they clash in a lot of things. Basically, we want to touch all the senses of our customers. We want to be more, we want to affect their lives in terms of, we want to get into their heads, like what could we do to generate more sales from our customers through, well, effortless, diba? Hindi naman effortless, but just activating your sense of smell that makes you hungry. Hey, I want to grab some Jollibee, you want to come with me. So it generates more revenue, more sales, more profit. So it's a good, it's good for the business because of user experience, because of customer experience. So experience encompasses not just UI, or hindi lang yan siya visual. It's a different, it's a lot of senses in one. So for instance, another example is Starbucks. So kanina, Sir Chris mentioned about Starbucks, diba? When you go into their shop, you can smell the coffee roasting. The ambience is very much coffee-like. One strategy that they do actually is some of them purposely misspell your names. So it becomes like a marketing tactic wherein our users or our customers begin to take a picture of your cup na, ay, they misspelled my name, and then it goes viral and stuff like that. So that's one way of generating sales by leveraging UX or customer experience. So actually, UX and I wanted to explain UX in the context of startups. Kasi diba, when we're as startups, and as you scale, feedback becomes more valuable to the company. It's not enough that you do what you do, but you want to grow and adapt to the times. So I guess let's start on the our agenda for today. So for today, we want to talk about the following: basically define, gather insight, feedback, synthesizing your feedback, approaching your feedback with empathy, turning feedback into actionable insights, and a few more notes to help you out on your startup journey with regards to getting feedback from your customers. So, defining and gathering feedback. Tada! Teka. Ba't ang hirap nito? Ayan. So, by now, you probably have your winning idea. So, okay na, you have potential investors. Chances are you're already making money or trying to deal with sales. So, you have that, check na yan. Next, you already did your market research. You already assessed that, hey, this product is desirable and this product is viable and it's feasible. So that's the first step naman in doing our startups. So once we're done assessing that, we're doing a working prototype, diba? So when we're doing prototypes, we're probably thinking na we have to test it, we have to bring it to users and stuff like that. But the thing is, prototypes are not really when you want to release like prototypes, it will only uncover so much about user behavior. For example, it will only validate flows. But once you're done with your prototype, you want to turn it into an MVP, right? Something that the users might use, something that you will roll out. So during my startup, I also joined Startup Week and before, wherein we did like a 3-day hackathon and basically come up with startup idea and give a prototype and pitch. And elevator pitches are the most nerve-wracking part of hackathons. So how do we get feedback from our MVP once we're in that situation? Hey, we already have the working prototype and the MVP. How might we improve our product? So the answer to that is customer feedback. So, sige, for example, na-release nyo na yung product nyo, you already have MVP, stuff like that. User feedback is one of the most important currencies in the world of UX. It gives you an advantage against your competitors. And I will discuss more on that later, the advantages against your competitors. Customer-centric companies are like about 60% more profitable than those not focused on the customers, because the best customer-centric companies, they really put their customers and users first. They design products and services to meet the needs of their users or their customers. So as designers, that's our job, to help bring more revenue through design for our company. So it's not just designing pixels, pushing pixels to in Figma or Adobe. It's more about generating profit, making it easier for the user to use, making it delightful for the user to use. So when a product is delightful, users come back and there's retention, there is babalik yung users mo sa product mo, and they will recommend it to their peers. You will probably gain more users in the long run. So next is, there are also companies that claim to be customer-centric, but if you've used Amazon before, diba, some of their interface is very hard to navigate. Parang they're a very successful company, but as you can see, parang ang hirap maka-order man lang. Mahirap man lang mag-sign up, ganun. You have to attach your credit card, PayPal, stuff like that. So this is one of the few B2C companies that are successful, but they have dark patterns all over their websites. It's proven effective naman for them because it generates and converts sales. So that's important to them. So there's another company that's really, really customer centric. Like you can see it from their products, you can see it from their services. So it's, yeah, Apple. So the brand itself says that it's premium, it has class, it's expensive. It prides itself into being customer driven. So we all know Steve Jobs. He was a visionary. He created the first iPod, iPad, and iPhone, diba? So during his time, he had this vision wherein he wanted to have 1,000 songs in your pocket. So that's a slogan of iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. So based on that vision, we wanted to create a product on that vision. So now that we've established the brand, we wanted that 1,000 songs in your pocket. Who are our customers that will sell it to, diba? Kasi we want UX will allow your product you allow you to sell your product at a premium more, which we will discuss more on that later. So the more that our customers come back, the more customers that we will have in the long run, the more harder it is to identify them. But since we're a startup, we will have, it's expected that we will have like a few customers at the beginning. So of course, at first you will have our users. These are people who use our product on a daily basis or regularly, or at least subscribe to, diba? Then we also have our teammates. These are our coworkers. As designers, we're responsible for crafting delightful experiences for our end users. But before we release naman anything to the wild, to our user population, our first customers will most likely be our teammates, our leads, or perhaps our investors. So they will be the first people who will test out your products. And these are the people that you have to sell your product to as well. So it's important that we get their feedback. And we also have our own family, diba? We can also test actually our own, for example, we wanted to test if our flow makes sense. I mean, if a 55-year-old would understand it, we could go to our moms, we could go to our grandma. So there's a lot of misconception that when you say users, you're only targeting a specific cost segment. But when you're testing a product, everyone we deal with is a customer. When you think about it, customers are very diverse, diba? So if we just limit ourselves into one customer base, we want it will be hard for us to scale in the long run. But we have to start somewhere, and it's good that we start like small. So we gather feedback from our innermost circle. And now that we know who to ask for feedback, the next question is, why are we asking for feedback? What kind of feedback do we want from our customer? What do we want to find out? So these are important questions because getting feedback and applying feedback requires a lot of planning. So usually you get feedback, diba, after you give your MVPs, after you present your product. So let me give you an example na, for instance, me as a designer, I wanted to know if the flow for a certain feature matches their expectation. What do I do as a UX designer? With this, I know that I can do an unmoderated user test or an A/B test wherein I present a prototype and observe their behavior while using it. So, and then if I wanted feedback on user satisfaction, assuming my product is already mature and gaining traction, I can integrate an in-app feedback in our product or probably an email survey. So Sir Chris actually touched on that earlier, wherein I could use Google Forms or Hotjar to get user feedback. So it's important to know what kind of feedback you need from your customers so that you can plan your feedback getting or your user tests accordingly. So you have to understand, what do you want to find out? It's an important question before beginning to do any feedback gathering. So just like any kind of research, you have to define the problem, you have to figure out your target audience, who are you going to interview, who are you going to ask feedback from, which we answered naman earlier, di ba? Our users, it could be our teammates, or it could be our friends and families. So next is, how do you gather feedback as an early stage startup? You're probably asking that. So one, you have to talk to your customers. I cannot stress this enough because I think one of the biggest problems that startups are dealing with is that it's hard for them to figure out or to get information about their customers because one, it's really expensive. But it's important to talk to your customers. Only then, once you can talk to your customers, can you figure out their pains and their actual pains. Once you get that, you can design their experiences accordingly. So next is you have conversations with those closest to your customers. So for instance, as UX designers, we're mostly focused on creating, much like our developers, busy coding, busy making our product viable and desirable and feasible. So we need to talk to those people who are closest to the customers. This could be our customer support team, your sales team, your product manager, and more. The customer support team, they're one of the most important people naman in a startup because they're the ones talking to the customer if they have problems and complaints. They're the first people in the front line. And your sales team, basically, they're the people who try to sell your product. So they have to understand what the user or their customers want or how to make their product more appealing. So you as a designer, you would want that kind of insight. So you could also do social media polls, but that's really advanced naman. For example, you wanted to make your product trend and stuff like that. So you could also conduct user testing. This is the most common method for us UX designers. But the reality is, user testing is very expensive, like really expensive. It requires a lot of time, and you have to dedicate a team for it even sometimes. So what can you do as a startup like right now? My advice is you test internally because it's easy to say that, hey, let's do user testing, but most of the time there really isn't enough budget to do thorough user testing, or sometimes there's no budget for design at all. But please allot budget for designers. But if ever that does happen, the easiest way that you could test is to test internally. Because again, our customers come in differently. With internal testing, this could be your developers, your product owners, your co-designers, your friends, your mom, dad. Let them run through your prototype or MVP. You'll most likely get valuable usability feedback from that alone. So you have, in terms of getting a certain kind of feedback that you want, you can test that if you wanted to test the usability. So we are not testing the desirability in the market, not like that. But if you wanted to get feedback in terms of market desirability, how many people would buy your product, that's a different story. So again, if we just want to test the usability of the product, it's easier to test naman internally. So the first people who will check out your product. So next, when asking for feedback, one of the best things that you can do is to ask open-ended questions. So dito na yung part na users become more you are within your users reach. You can now interview them, you can now ask your developers, your stakeholders for feedback. So the best thing that you can do is basically ask open-ended questions. So an example of an open-ended question is what if you're testing a to-do app. So diba medyo familiar naman tayo sa to-do app. What made it difficult for you to create a to-do? Or what part of the process was not understandable to you, or what confused you. So that's an example of an open-ended question. So you get a lot of insights from that because you're not boxing the customer or the person that you're interviewing into one answer. So they could explore lots of possibilities, and there's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of insight. So the more insight that you get, the more feedback, the more that you can integrate those feedback in your product. So do not ask yes or no questions, because that's, again, that will box your customer. So you will get like a pretty little insight from that. Not multiple choice questions, because if you lay out the options to your customers, they will focus on those options and forget about their real experiences. So talk less and really listen more when you're asking for feedback. This does not only apply to getting feedback from customers, but feedback from, for example, our team, our stakeholders, because let's face it, feedback is really hard sometimes to get, especially when you're protective of your product, of your work. But it's important that we acknowledge that we acknowledge which feedback is helpful and which feedback is not. So later we'll touch on that. So next part of our agenda. So we're done na, diba? We define feedback na. What do we want? What do we want from our customers? What do we want to know? And we already figured out what we want to gather. We wanted to gather insights on the process or stuff like that. So the next process is we already have our feedback, diba? So the next step is to synthesize our feedback. Okay, so now I have my feedback. Now what? You have to make it digestible, meaning you have to make it easy to understand for your customers, your stakeholders. You have to present it to your team. Okay, so this is what we found out. So don't get too overwhelmed and, okay, we have the features, we have the feedback. How do we solve this problem? No, not yet. So we want to make it easy to understand. So the feedback you get is very, very, what do you call this? It's not grouped together. It's hard to understand because you get a lot of feedback, right? It could get very overwhelming. So the best thing that you can do is to group the similar feedback together. And then you can figure out common themes from that. So one technique that UX designers use is the card sorting technique. Basically, we group common themes together, and it helps us uncover which feedback is critical and needs attention. Most likely, reoccurring feedback. For example, this feature is not useful, or this bug is very detrimental to the product. So you will see that based on the design. That will also help you validate the features that is on the product. So for instance, they wanted to request like a certain feedback, and it's been reoccurring. So you can see na, you have to prioritize this feature because our 80% of our users that we interviewed said this and that based on their experience. So you have numbers to help you come up with the prioritization matrix, especially if you're data-driven, you want to sell ideas. So like I said, feedback volume matters. The more that the problem is reoccurring, the more that you have to focus on that problem and solve it immediately. So next is, we have to assess naman the feedback severity. Kasi in prioritization, it's not just say what the users want, but it's also how severe is this request. So for instance, it's a security vulnerability that we really have to act on it, because or else our users' data will be compromised. Does it hinder our user from accomplishing an important task, which is, for instance, our product wants to do customer insights. Our insights are not showing, it's not downloading and stuff like that. And then is it displaying incorrect data, or is it affecting the sales, meaning it's not converting anymore because users don't know where to click that certain button and stuff like that. So you have to assess the severity of the feedback based on what you figured out, what you found out on your testing, on your feedback gathering. So that's it for synthesizing. Just really quick lang naman kasi you're also gonna touch on the 3 and 4 and 5. So next is we have to approach feedback with empathy. So going back, we already have our feedback. We already know what to prioritize. We already figured out, okay, this is the feedback that we're gonna prioritize. So why? Diba, why? Because users don't actually know what they want. So it's our job to figure out what they're trying to anticipate, because you only know their pains, their problems. So we have to solve that based on our product, through our product. So remember that if you only design and build what your customer are telling you to build or what they want, by the time that the feature is done, it is likely that they wanted something else, or they already moved on that problem, or on that like want. They will tell you one thing, and then once you say, no, okay, let's implement that, and then iba pala. They wanted something different pala. So what you can do as a UX designer, or as someone who's working in a startup environment, you have to listen to your users with humility. So you have to understand your customers' needs before they even say it, before they even articulate it, because some of our customers have a hard time articulating their needs. So you have to anticipate it before they even know it. And their feedback will really enable you to grow your product. And then once you have once you're ready for execution, you have to ship it like really fast, like ship that, then just convert those feedback into sales. And then of course, be proactive. You have to champion your users all the time if you're the UX designer. It's actually a struggle between for example, hey, we need to make it feasible, therefore we can't do this design, yada yada. So there will be a lot of compromise in multidisciplinary teams. So once we get like quick feedback from users, we have to act on them. So you might be asking, how might we get quick feedback when, you know, we're a startup, we don't have budget, we don't have money? Actually, it's easy, but you need to figure out who are the right people. There are lots of tools in the internet. We have b.i.t.e.s, which is basically you have to test your prototype with like real users. It could be paid. It's actually also free as well. So you could use your prototype links in Figma, Adobe XD, or Sketch if people are still using that. You also have Google Sheets, forms wherein you could, you know, ask your users stuff. You could also have Loom, wherein you could record the flow in which your users take, and then you could figure out, okay, our users were confused at this bit. We have to change this flow, stuff like that. And we also have Zoom, wherein we could do like one-on-one interviews with like the people that we want. So we already have the tools available naman in the market. All we need to do is to plan out who we're going to ask feedback from, and what are we gonna do with that feedback. So okay, so since we're touching on empathy, I think a good topic to discuss would be COVID-19, because it has disrupted a lot of industry. One industry is the hotel and restaurant industry. So others naman have used it as an opportunity to pivot or improve their product. So for us, actually in our company, our first product was basically audience measurement, wherein our cameras are trained to see human beings and then display content at their screens based on your features. So for instance, it's like Google Ads, but in real life. So you have retails, we have malls, we have casinos. So in order to like generate like the right ad for you while you're like looking at a certain product. So but that at this time it was really hard to sell that, so that wasn't like the priority of the market, that wasn't like interesting to the market, so we had to pivot. And we came up with an AI solution called SAMI. SAMI is basically it tracks the how dirty a surface is, and it tells the user if the surface needs cleanup na. So if it needs cleanup, it notifies a cleaner. Um, it creates a manifest for that cleaning time, and so on. So we had to pivot based on the circumstances we have now, and it was really important that we adapt and we approached our problem with empathy. So we were solving a problem wherein our customers wanted to make sure that our spaces are safe to use. You know, it's hard to go out without feeling anxious right now because it's a pandemic. It's a stressful time. To say it's stressful actually would be an understatement. Um, before we could dine in with no problems, diba? No worries, yan. Eat out with friends. You could hang out with multiple people at once. Oops, sorry about that. And now it's harder to do that because businesses are slowly closing due to the impact of COVID-19. As you can see, diba, even the big chains are there's a lot of retrenchment happening. So it's a very stressful time, especially for different industries. So the food industry is one, and the shift is very evident because people are scared and anxious to go out. There are some, of course, risk takers, but it's always a gamble. And if someone, if someone here is affected by COVID, my heart really goes out to you because it's not easy. And it's really important that we recognize that it's a pandemic and we're required to adapt to it, diba? Especially businesses. So yeah, so one product that that really amazed me in terms of like shipping features, like in terms of responding to the pandemic, is Food Panda. I think when I did this presentation, I was really hungry. I don't know, man. I don't know. I've been talking about food kanina pa. I was talking about Jollibee, and there's Starbucks ngayon, Food Panda. So it's during this time that this company could help this sector that's been greatly affected by COVID-19. So if you are a startup with empathy for your users, you would understand that one of their pains is we want to make sure that our food is safe, that we don't have to go out just to get good food, and we wanted to protect business restaurant or business owners that are selling food so that they could still generate income while while adapting to COVID-19. So they released this feature called contactless delivery, wherein the driver just leaves the food on your doorstep, and then you guys are feet apart, and more. And it helps them protect the customers and the drivers from transmission. So you see what happens when you have empathy for your users. It will empower not only your users, but also those shops that you're trying to help, so that you can help them generate more profit. So they started with identifying the problem, empathizing with their users and stakeholders, and then their needs were anticipated. They didn't have to say it. I mean, we didn't have to say, no, hey, can you implement contactless delivery? No. They found out that it's going to be a pain point for their users, and so they shipped that feature right immediately, right when COVID-19 was starting in the Philippines. So yeah, that's a very good example, I think, of how we can approach feedback with empathy and how it can empower people, with our product. Kasi our products are actually indirectly and directly affecting people's lives for the good and for the bad. And you, as the designer or as the product owner, you have to assess how you want to impact your product, how you want your product to impact different industries. So always remember that there's lots of room for innovation and improvement. If you really want to accelerate your product's growth, you have to have empathy for your users. Because it, again, like Sir Chris mentioned, it all comes back to your users. So always champion for your users, and always think about, as a UX designer, you have to think about what would make it easier for them. You have to make your product desirable for them. So next, you also have to remember that all designs are hypotheses. Don't beat yourself up too much if you don't get it right the first time, because you will rarely get it right the first time, because UX is an iterative and continuous process. That's a hard truth. And sometimes your designs won't get implemented because we have to prioritize which features to ship and what quality we have to compromise in order to be quick. So validating if a design is a success would depend on your OKRs and KPIs. So OKRs are objective key something. Basta OKRs and KPIs, but it's a key performance indicator whether your design is doing good, is it doing conversions and stuff like that. So if it's hitting your goals or your the desired outcomes for this year and stuff like that. So do not beat yourself up too much if you did it wrong. That's the purpose of feedback, diba? We have to understand our users na sometimes we will get it wrong. And that's something that you really have to accept, especially when you're a designer. Or even if you're just a product manager, you will not get it right the first time. What you can do is improve your product based on where you left off or where you hit a roadblock. Always improve and realize that it's a continuous process. Do not beat yourself up too much for it. Like really, it's important din kasi that you have to, as a designer, you have to take care of your heart. Kasi if you take care of your heart, you will produce really good designs and you will be more empathetic to the user. So the more that you take care of the way you think, the way you handle things, it will be a good effect. It will have a good effect on your product in the long run. So take care of yourselves and your minds, guys. Don't beat yourself up too much, okay? Especially now that we're on a pandemic. So the next is we have to turn feedback into actionable insights. So we have feedback. We know what's best. We approach feedback na with empathy. We have synthesized it and stuff like that. How do we make it actionable? What do we do now? So this is the execution part. So what's an actionable insight these are actions that we can undertake based on the data we gathered. So by data, these are the feedback, user feedback. So feedback or data can be both qualitative and quantitative. The reason as to why we need actionable insights is that through this, we can create or make strategic and well thought out decisions. So if you're in the upper management, for example, you're the CEO, you're the lead, you want to make decisions based on data because we can't, blindly make decisions. Well, you can make naman decisions based on intuition, but it's good that we have something to show to stakeholders because we're also selling our product to them, our feedback, the feedback that we have to them, saying, hey, 40% of our users say that they would prefer competitor A because like this, 60% say that our product is hard to use because this, 90% is fine, 90% naman find feature like very useful because like this, 10% of users would recommend our product to their friends. So it would make you ask, why would the 10% want to recommend? Why do they find this useful? Why do they think that our product is hard to use? Why would they prefer competitor A's product? So there will be a lot of insights that you can get based on the data that you have. So the next step really is to turn it into execution, to bring that why into actuality, into house. So I think like right now, Zoom, they're the first people who did the breakout room feature. Google Meet doesn't have that. And they also have this other features that aren't present in Google Meet. Here, you can do breakout rooms, but then, a few months later, Google copied it. So a lot of users would use Google Meet na lang din because it has naman the same features as Zoom. And then Zoom, you have to download a standalone app. But with Google Meet, you just have to access a link directly. You don't have to download anything. So, it's not about who did it first, especially in terms of features, but who did it better. So always focus on the experience. So do it better, leverage that, and sell that. So sell that to your stakeholders. So next is, you tell a story with your data. So you have to get buy-in from your team na, hey, we need to implement this. We need to align our goal into this thing because we want this feedback. This feedback is really crucial. You have to set expectations to your teams. So you will be negotiating a lot. There will be a lot of negotiating with the developers, with the operations, with designers, especially if you're passionate about alleviating customer pains. You have to sell ideas because people are not easily convinced. Like, you really have to sell it to them. It's important to get buy-in when championing for customers because not everyone in your team will have the same mindset as you, that you're very customer-centric and this is why. So here's a massive benefit naman. Once you get buy-in from developers and designers, there will be a lot of what do you call that? Parang compromise. So for instance, hey, we don't want to compromise the quality of this feature, but then it's really hard to implement. It will take so much time in terms of the developers pa. So you really have, especially if you're the product owner, product manager, you have to balance that out. Because you have to ship really fast because speed is really important, especially in the startup world. Diba? Sometimes it should only take you a year to get a product out, and it's very stressful and very pressuring. So you really have to compromise a little bit of quality, especially when you want to release a product quickly. So a massive benefit naman for your startup, once you realize the value of customer experiences, it will enable your business to charge for a premium. So better experience, you get better margin, you get more profit. So to prove this, we have different tiers sa mga flights. We have the economy class, business class, first class. But then you get to ask, why do some people prefer to take the first class rather than the economy class when it's much cheaper, diba? I mean, you're going to the same destination, but you're just spending a lot to ride the first class because these people acknowledge that the experience of riding first class is different and good experience is expensive. So if you have good experience in your application, it enables you to sell your product at in a better price, and a justifiable price that will bring you more profit. So for instance, another example would be a 1-star hotel room, a 5-star hotel room. Same thing. You can sleep in them. They offer the same function. Basically, they give you a room to sleep in for the night. Why do some people prefer to stay in 5-star hotels? Why would they spend bakit sila pupunta ng Shangri-La when there's, I don't know, Sogo Hotel, or I don't know. But, there are hotels that offer the same thing. So, why? Because experience naman, again, is very, very crucial to the business. It can make or break profit. So, but then of course, it's not always like, the Bible that you really have to UX. There is compromise that you will have to face along your journey. So now that we're done, we're gonna have the final notes. So final notes, just like final tips on feedback and startups in general. So speed is important. So when you want feedback, you want to build relationships with your customers. And this is important, especially when you're growing. You have to respond to emails, to your investors. Just do it quick. Like, if you have the time, especially if you're the CEO, you really have to block off time in just answering the questions of your customers, because speed and getting feedback is important. So it's you have to drive the team into realizing that as well. So yeah, again, there will be a lot of compromise, fighting from the developer side, designer side, from the product owner. You have to understand that speed will compromise a lot with quality, and it will be an ongoing and a negotiation process with the product owner, especially when you have looming deadlines. It's important that you balance this out, manage how much quality you compromise, and make sure that it will not be lethal for the business. And always remember that progress is better than perfection. Do not wait until you get it perfectly. Always remember that incremental steps will always get you further than like doing one big thing and then failing, diba? It's better to fail really fast. I think it's a very cliche na parang saying in the startup world, you have to fail fast, but it's actually really true, because when you fail fast, you get feedback fast. Okay, this doesn't work. We have to pivot, or this feature needs to be improved. We have to improve this, and you get more revenue from that. So you have to be patient, and you have to be understanding, because there will be a lot of iterations. You have to understand, especially if you're the PO, that your developers and designers can only do so much and stuff like that. And you really have to be patient, because it will really take a long time for you to build a perfect, or not exactly the perfect, but a desirable product. So just remember that you have to compromise a little bit. So next is focus on your why. Always focus on your why. If you guys have watched this K-drama, it's actually really famous right now. It's called Startup. It walks you through the same thing, the startups experience when building a startup. So there are two things that they built. One is called Noonhill. Basically, it's a text-to-speech application wherein what the camera sees, they will interpret to the user. So the first motivation for this is the aunt of this girl, because she has sight problems. So she had a motivation, she had a customer in mind. So she knows the pains, she knows the struggles. So she knows where to focus on the why. Because if you have the why, according to Friedrich Nietzsche, you will always bear any house. Diba? So there's also this one product that they built. It's a self-driving car. So same motivation. They wanted to help their halmoni, or their grandmother, to see better. So they wanted to make her parang, make her more mobile so that she can go to places on her own, which she doesn't need car assistance. They did a self-driving car. So always focus on your why, and always focus on your customers. Why are you doing this and stuff like that? So, ilang slides na ba? Okay, so one more, I think, recommendation. This book is one of the most, I think, insightful in terms of getting feedback. It's very straightforward. It's not very theoretical. Na, hey, do this, and it's very practical. It will help you understand why sometimes your idea is not the final idea, why you need to pivot, why you need to why you need to talk to customers. It's a very good book, especially because it talks about asking the right feedback from your customers. So the mom test basically says, imagine if your mom was your first customer and stuff like that. So it talks about asking open-ended questions, and a lot of actually my presentation was gotten from here. So the mom test, really good book actually. it was actually recommended to me by a friend from UXPH about customer feedback. So that's it. Any questions? Questions? And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. This actually I'm really happy to share my learnings with everyone naman. Thank you so much for the opportunity to, again, to talk to you and to help you guys out. I mean, it's one of the best things naman to impact people positively just by doing this. So really, really grateful. And I hope you learned a lot. So you can reach me. Important ba? You can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, China Sevillano. I'm on, I don't know, Twitter, China Sevillano. I'm on GitHub. I'm on Dribble. Lots of, just search for my name. So that's all. Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
thank you so much, Miss China. Okay, all of that are noted. Okay, on to our question and answer. I'd like to start off with our incubatees. Any volunteer, guys? Okay, okay, is it okay? I'll have the questions na lang, Miss China, since we are pressed out of time. Okay, so Miss China, how often should we check customer feedbacks and update the design and interface?
Okay, wait lang. Can you hear me? You can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Usually we get feedback. Based on my experience, we get feedback after we do the product, or we create the designs for the product. So we present it to our CEO. We have to present it to our developer teams. So we get feedback from there. And of course, our CEO is a salesperson, so he sells a lot. And he knows customer pains and stuff like that. So he's the first person that we ask for feedback. So it's really important to know who you want to ask for feedback from. So going back to your question, that the time that you have to ask for feedback is when you're done with your design. Especially if you're a UX designer, you have to validate naman your designs, even if it's just the flow or the usability. You can do that. If you're done with your product, if you have the MVP and stuff like that, you will get feedback right after you, of course, publish your application, once it's out into the wild and stuff like that. So feedback really comes after the idea comes in. So if you want feedback on your feedback on what you did with the feedback, so it's the after, you go back to the person or the person who told you the feedback and ask them, hey, is this what you expected? Does this fulfill your user expectations? Because as designers, it's important that we think about user expectations. So if we manage to surprise our users, hey, I did not expect that the button would be here. It was hard for me to find. You'll see that, and you're forced to, design or redesign that. Oh God, I failed again. So one of the hardest or the most nerve-wracking part of being a UX designer is the usability test, because that really uncovers how parang ang bobo ko palagi. Parang, I designed this incorrectly and have to go back to the drawing board again, brainstorm again. So again, it's a very iterative process, and feedback gathering never stops, as in never stops. You'll have to eat it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, like, oh, kapoy na, it's just stuff like that. So you really have to understand that feedback is important, and it should be present in right after you solve a problem. So yeah. Did I answer your question? Or...
Yes. Okay, listening to you made me miss Davao more. I used to live there for 8 years prior to coming here for good last July.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Is it the konyo, the Davao konyo?
I still have the Konyo accent with me, my gosh. Kasi maglabas na din talaga siya. From time to time. Okay. Okay. Okay, any pahabol question from our incubatees before I proceed with our last question?
You guys go. Take this opportunity. You know,
Yes, baka may hindi ka natanong sa previous session.
yeah.
Going once? Twice?
Go.
Oh, I think Miss China, you've already mentioned then how they can contact you. So I think if they have questions later, they can still contact you. Okay. Uh, and then we have this last question from our participant here. Okay, I'll read it, Miss China. Okay, when is the best time to release your new or improved features after gathering feedbacks? Or is there a specific timing or for this?
Okay. It depends on your process. I think kasi in our company, we do agile. So, sprints. So, by sprints, di ba? So, when you're dealing with sprints, 1 week design or 2 weeks design, 2 weeks development. So, we have like a set process for that. So, right after we release our product, for example, tapos ng one sprint, that's when we gather feedback usually once we present it to the customer, once we have our release. And yeah, basically, it depends. For example, you have waterfall wherein it will take you like 5 months to develop like an entire app, diba? So it will still comprise of sprints. So, but it will take longer kasi design and then development. You have to take into consideration how many hours you want your developers to work within a day, how many hours you want your designers to work within a day. So you have to take that into consideration as well. So, for example, if you do like 5 months, by the time that you release that, probably somebody else has already done that feature. So, speed is really important, especially when you're trying to win investments. So, a lot of investors, for example, you have pivoted or, you nag-pivot ka ng product mo to cater to COVID-19. If COVID-19 ends or if there's a vaccine, wala, yung product mo or the feature mo is already obsolete. Hindi na siya needed ng market. So you really have to take into consideration those kinds of time frames. So once you're done figuring out, okay, we have to really do it like in a month or in 2 months, you have to ship this feature. That's when you ask for feedback once you're done developing that feature. Kasi if you're just going to present the prototype, there's no functionality into it. There's just aesthetics. So do it after you're done with the MVP-ish. The one with the workable prototype na talaga where there's an API, backend, blah, 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 blah. So,
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, okay, Miss China. Aside from taking care of our startups' heart, mind, and self, do you have quick last words for our startups and incubatees present?
okay. Ano ba? Masyado naman tong corny, pero it's important to always consider ethics whenever you're dealing with startups, because I've learned that a lot of startups naman start with good intentions. For example, hey, I wanted to create Facebook. It's a social media app, ganyan. And then, there are unintended consequences in the long run. For example, you swayed a nation's entire vote and stuff like that. So there will be unintended consequences. So you as someone who's starting a startup, always think of in the next 5 years, who or what industries are going to be affected. In this parang episode in startup, parang technology, they tackled how technology are reducing jobs. So you have to think about that. Who are you replacing? What are you automating? What are you adding? What value are you presenting? And what change will you have in the future? So what is the impact of your startup? So always think about that. It's not enough that you look in hindsight na parang, oh, 2 years, 1 year. You have to look beyond that, like 5 years, and really have empathy that you can balance a good future for the people around you and a good future for your startup. So always balance that, and that involves ethics talaga. I think it's lost kasi, especially now that business, money, we're money making machines, money milking cows. But it's always good to take into consideration the consequences that our startups or our the products that we are building. So yeah, that's it, I think. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, that's it for a second session. Thank you so much again, Miss China. Okay, so before we proceed with our next part, I am reminding everyone to please attend our DOST Startup Grant public consultation on Monday, December 7, 9 to 12 noon. Okay, so at this point, I am now passing the virtual mic to our ever beautiful project leader na mahilig din magbike, Miss Rhea Hagisan.
Yes, hello. So there. Oh, you can't see me. Okay, there. So good morning, everyone. So thank you so much to our esteemed speakers. We have China and Chris, whose expertise really resonates and give insights and more work inclined tips on the UI UX. So more than anything, thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning sharing your expertise with our incubatees and startups. Thank you also to my team in CDO b.i.t.e.s for organizing another wonderful and successful fire session. And finally, to our incubatees and startups who didn't fail to show up every Saturday just to learn new things from our speakers. And it's already December. I know that we are already in the holiday spirit, but more than anything, always keep safe, continue striving for the betterment of your startup and your ideas, and for sure, you are already one way closer to success. May everyone have a wonderful Saturday and weekend ahead. Happy biking, Charing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our fire session, everyone. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Please make sure to join the public consultation pala on Monday for the startup grant. It's at 9 a.m. Please sign up. It's for free. Ang Mindanao and Visayas session, 9 a.m. on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amping everyone.